The restaurant was too fancy for Victoria Flynn, and she knew it the moment she walked through the door with its crystal chandeliers and waiters in pressed white jackets. But she had promised herself she would try. She smoothed down the borrowed navy dress that her roommate had insisted she wear, feeling the fabric bunch awkwardly around her waist as she approached the hostess stand. Her hands were already trembling, and the date hadn't even started yet. "Reservation for Calloway," she heard a deep voice say behind her, and she turned to find herself looking up at a man who seemed to embody everything this restaurant represented. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, with dark hair swept back and eyes that were a startling shade of blue. This was Blake Calloway, the man from the dating app who had somehow matched with her despite the obvious gulf between their worlds. "Victoria?" he asked, and his smile was warm, genuine, not at all what she had expected. "That's me," she managed, her voice coming out smaller than she intended. "You can call me Tori." The hostess led them to a table by the window overlooking the city lights, and Victoria felt her anxiety spike with every step. She had been on exactly 3 dates in her entire 24 years of life, and none of them had gone well. The last one had ended with her accidentally spilling an entire pitcher of water on the guy. She was a disaster when it came to this sort of thing, which was why she had sworn off dating entirely, until her best friend Emma had practically forced her to create the profile. Blake pulled out her chair and she sat down clumsily, her knee hitting the table leg hard enough to make the silverware rattle. She felt her face flush red. "So," Blake said, settling into his own seat with the kind of easy confidence she envied, "tell me about yourself." "Your profile said you work at a bookstore." "Yeah," Victoria said, gripping her napkin like a lifeline. "Flynn's Books on 32nd Street. It's actually my family's store. My dad opened it 30 years ago and I've been working there since I was 16. "That must be nice, working with family." "It is," she said, relaxing slightly as she talked about something familiar. "My dad's getting older, so I'm slowly taking over more of the management. It's not glamorous or anything, but I love it. Being surrounded by books all day, recommending stories to customers, hosting author events. It feels like home." The waiter appeared, and Victoria's anxiety returned full force. The menu was in French. She stared at it, her mind going completely blank as she tried to decipher what any of it meant. "Would you like me to order for both of us?" Blake asked gently, and there was no condescension in his voice, just kindness. "Please," she whispered gratefully. He ordered in perfect French, and Victoria felt the gulf between them widen even further. When the waiter left, she took a sip of water and nearly choked on it, coughing into her napkin. "Are you all right?" Blake asked, concern creasing his forehead. "I'm not good at this," she said suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Dating, I mean, I'm terrible at it. I don't know why I even agreed to come here. This place is so fancy and you're so—" She gestured vaguely at him, "and I'm just me. I work in a bookstore. I still live with a roommate in a tiny apartment. I have a cat named Mr. Darcy, and I spend most Friday nights reading romance novels in my pajamas." Blake leaned back in his chair, and for a moment she thought he would make an excuse and leave. Instead, he said, "I'll wait forever for you." Victoria blinked. "What?" "I said I'll wait forever for you," Blake repeated, his blue eyes steady on hers. "To get comfortable, to feel like yourself, however long it takes." "Because the woman who just described herself sounds exactly like someone I want to know better." "You don't even know me," Victoria said, but something in her chest felt warm. "Then let's fix that," Blake said. "And for the record, I spend most Friday nights working late at my office, ordering takeout and falling asleep at my desk. Your Friday nights sound infinitely better." What do you do? Victoria asked. Your profile was kind of vague about work. Blake hesitated, and she saw something flicker across his face. I run a company, Calloway Enterprises. We do commercial real estate development. The name clicked in her mind. Calloway Enterprises. She had seen it on billboards around the city, on the sides of buildings being constructed downtown. This was not just some successful businessman. This was Blake Calloway, billionaire real estate mogul, whose face had been on the cover of Forbes last month. Her roommate had left the magazine on their coffee table. Oh my God, Victoria said, her eyes widening. You're that Blake Calloway. I'm still just Blake, he said quickly. The guy who liked your profile because you quoted Jane Austen and said you believed in love stories. Why would someone like you be on a dating app? Victoria asked, genuinely confused. Blake ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time, he looked uncomfortable. Because I'm 31 years old, I work too much, and every woman I meet through my usual circles is more interested in my bank account than in me. When I saw your profile, you seemed real, genuine. Like you actually cared about things that mattered. Their food arrived, and Victoria stared down at what appeared to be some kind of fish in a delicate sauce with vegetables arranged artistically around it. It looked like something from a cooking show, beautiful and intimidating. I don't even know which fork to use, she admitted. Blake picked up the fork on the outside left. Start here and work your way in. But honestly, Tori, nobody actually cares. These rules are just pretentious nonsense. She took a bite and it was delicious, but she barely tasted it. Her mind was reeling. This was surreal. She was on a date with a billionaire who was looking at her like she was the most interesting person in the room. Tell me more about the bookstore, Blake said. What kind of books do you love? That got her talking. She told him about her favorite authors, about the regular customers who came in every week, about the book club she hosted on Thursday evenings. She talked about how the store was struggling with competition from online retailers, how they were trying to create more community events to keep people coming in, how her father worried about whether they could keep the doors open another 5 years. Blake listened intently, asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested. He told her about growing up in Connecticut, about his father who had started the company with a single property and built it into an empire, about how he had inherited the business at 25 when his father had a heart attack and decided to retire early. It sounds lonely, Victoria said without thinking. Blake paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. It is, he admitted. I have employees, business partners, people who want things from me, but actual friends, people who see me as just Blake, those are rare. I can't imagine that, Victoria said. I have Emma, my roommate, who's been my best friend since college. I have my dad. The regulars at the store who feel like extended family. I don't have money, but I have people. That's worth more than you think, Blake said quietly. They talked through dinner, through dessert, and when Victoria realized 2 hours had passed, she was stunned. The anxiety that had gripped her at the start of the evening had faded into something else, something that felt like genuine connection. As they left the restaurant, Blake turned to her. Can I see you again? I don't understand why you'd want to, Victoria said honestly. We're from completely different worlds. Maybe that's exactly why, Blake said. You make me feel like I'm not just the guy who runs Calloway Enterprises. You make me feel like I'm someone worth talking to for reasons that have nothing to do with money or business. Victoria looked up at him, at this impossibly handsome, impossibly wealthy man who had just spent 2 hours listening to her ramble about books and bookstores. Okay, she said. Yes. Blake's smile could have lit up the entire city. Friday night. And this time you pick the place. She did. She took him to a tiny Italian restaurant in her neighborhood where the tables were covered in red checkered cloths, and the owner's grandmother made the pasta by hand in the back. Blake showed up in jeans and a button-down shirt, looking somehow even better than he had in the suit. "This is perfect," he said, looking around at the cozy space with genuine delight. They shared a plate of spaghetti carbonara and talked like old friends. Blake told her about his mother who had passed away when he was 20, about how she had loved reading and would have loved to meet someone who ran a bookstore. Victoria told him about her own mother who had left when she was 12, how it had been just her and her dad ever since. "Is that why you're afraid of dating?" Blake asked gently. "Because she left." Victoria considered this. "Maybe. I think I'm afraid of being vulnerable, of letting someone see all the messy, awkward parts of me and having them decide I'm not worth it." "You are worth it," Blake said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I know we've only had 2 dates, but I already know that." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it because I have to. I'm saying it because it's true." They started seeing each other regularly after that. Blake would stop by the bookstore during her lunch breaks, bringing coffee and sandwiches from the deli down the street. They would sit in the back room, surrounded by boxes of new arrivals, and talk about everything and nothing. He fit into her world so naturally that sometimes she forgot about the billions of dollars and the business empire. 3 weeks into dating, Emma cornered Victoria in their apartment. "So, are you going to tell me what's going on with this Blake guy? You've been floating around here like you're in a dream." "I think I'm falling for him," Victoria admitted, "and it terrifies me." "Why? He seems great, and he looks at you like you hung the moon." "Because he's Blake Calloway, Emma. He has more money than I can even comprehend. He's been to every country in the world. He went to Harvard, and I'm just me." "Stop with the just me thing," Emma said firmly. "You are smart, kind, passionate, and you run an entire bookstore basically by yourself because your dad's arthritis is getting worse. You are not just anything." But the insecurity lingered. It came to a head when Blake invited her to a charity gala his company was hosting. "You don't have to," he said quickly when he saw the panic on her face. "But I'd really like you there with me." "I don't have anything to wear to something like that," Victoria said. "Then let me help with that." "No," she said sharply. "No, I don't want your money, Blake. That's not what this is about." Blake held up his hands. "Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to overstep." Victoria felt terrible immediately. "I'm sorry. I just feel like I'm already out of my depth here, and if you start buying me things, it makes it worse." "What if Emma helped you find something?" Blake suggested. "Would that feel better?" It did a little. Emma took her shopping at a consignment store, and they found a deep green dress that fit perfectly and didn't completely drain Victoria's savings account. When Blake picked her up the night of the gala, the look on his face made every bit of anxiety worth it. "You look stunning," he said, and he looked pretty incredible himself in a classic black tuxedo. The gala was overwhelming. The venue was a historic mansion with marble floors and soaring ceilings. Women dripped in diamonds, men discussed stock portfolios and vacation homes in the Hamptons. Victoria nursed a glass of champagne and tried to look like she belonged. "Blake, darling." A woman in a silver dress appeared at his elbow. She was beautiful in the way that money could make you beautiful, all sharp angles and perfect highlights. "It's been too long." "Vanessa," Blake said, his tone polite but cool. "This is my girlfriend, Victoria." Girlfriend. He had never used that word before, and Victoria felt a thrill run through her. Vanessa's eyes swept over Victoria, assessing and dismissing in one glance. "How lovely. Where did you two meet?" "A dating app," Victoria said, lifting her chin. "How modern," Vanessa said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Blake, we should talk about the Henderson property. Daddy thinks there might be an opportunity for collaboration. Not tonight, Blake said firmly. Tonight, I'm here with Tori. He guided Victoria away, his hand warm on the small of her back. I'm sorry about her. Vanessa is the daughter of a business associate. She's been trying to get me to date her for 3 years. She's beautiful, Victoria said quietly. She's a shark, Blake corrected. And I have no interest in sharks. They danced, Blake's arms around her, and Victoria tried to let go of the comparison. But she could feel eyes on them all night, could hear the whispers. Who was she? Where had she come from? What was Blake Calloway doing with her? In the car on the way home, Blake sensed her mood. Talk to me. I don't fit in your world, Victoria said. That was made very clear tonight. I don't care about my world, Blake said. I care about you. For how long? Victoria asked, and her voice broke. How long until you realize that I'm always going to be the girl who doesn't know which fork to use, who can't talk about stock portfolios, who wears consignment store dresses? Blake pulled the car over, right there on the side of the road, and turned to face her. Listen to me. I have spent the last 6 years of my life surrounded by people who only see me as a wallet or a business opportunity. You are the first person in longer than I can remember who makes me feel human, who makes me laugh, who challenges me to think about things beyond quarterly earnings and property acquisitions. I don't want someone who fits in my world. I want someone who helps me build a new one. I'm scared, Victoria whispered. I know, Blake said, taking her hands. I'm scared too. I'm terrified that you'll wake up one day and decide that being with me is too complicated, too much pressure, that you'll walk away because my life is too much. Is that why you didn't tell me who you were right away? Blake nodded. I just wanted to be a regular guy on a date with an amazing woman, just for a little while. Victoria leaned forward and kissed him, soft and gentle. You are a regular guy. You're just a regular guy who happens to have a complicated life. Can you handle complicated? Blake asked against her lips. I can try, Victoria said, as long as you're patient with me. I told you on our first date, Blake said. I'll wait forever. The weeks turned into months. Blake became a fixture at the bookstore, helping unpack boxes, charming customers, even fixing the ancient coffee maker when it broke down. Victoria's father, Thomas, was skeptical at first, but Blake won him over by actually caring about the business, offering suggestions that came from a place of genuine interest rather than condescension. You know, Thomas said to Victoria one evening after Blake had left, that young man is good for you. I see the way he looks at you. That's how I used to look at your mother before everything went wrong. Does it worry you? Victoria asked. How different we are. Different is good, Thomas said. Different keeps things interesting. What worries me is how scared you are of being happy. The words hit home. Victoria realized her father was right. She was so afraid of getting hurt that she was holding back, keeping walls up even as Blake tried to break them down. She decided to take a leap. She planned a surprise for Blake, convincing his assistant Maria to block off an entire Saturday. When the day came, she picked him up from his penthouse apartment wearing jeans and a sweater. Where are we going? Blake asked, amused. It's a surprise. She drove them 2 hours outside the city to a small town she had found online. There was a harvest festival happening, the kind of quintessentially autumn event with pumpkin patches and hay rides and apple cider. It was about as far from Blake's usual world as possible. This is incredible, Blake said, looking around with genuine wonder. I haven't been to something like this since I was a kid. They spent the day like normal people. They picked apples, got lost in a corn maze, drank cider while sitting on hay bales and watching kids run around. Blake was relaxed in a way Victoria had never seen, laughing freely, his usual intensity replaced by something lighter. "Thank you," he said as they drove back as the sun set. "I needed this more than you know." "I wanted you to see that I can make an effort too," Victoria said. "That I'm not always going to be the scared girl who doesn't think she's good enough." Blake reached over and laced his fingers through hers. "Tori, you have always been good enough, more than good enough." They had been dating for 5 months when Blake asked her to move in with him. They were lying on the couch in her tiny apartment, Mr. Darcy curled up on Blake's chest, watching old movies. "Move in with me," Blake said suddenly. Victoria sat up. "What? Move in with me," he repeated. "I know it's fast, but I hate saying goodbye to you every night. I hate waking up without you. I want to come home to you. I want to build a life with you." "Blake, your apartment is a penthouse. It probably costs more per month than I make in a year. So, it would be our home, yours and mine." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "What if it doesn't work? What if I move in and we realize we drive each other crazy?" "Then we figure it out," Blake said simply. "But I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to be amazing together." She moved in 2 weeks later. Emma helped her pack up her meager belongings, teasing her mercilessly about landing a billionaire boyfriend. "Don't forget about us little people," she joked, but Victoria could see the genuine happiness in her friend's eyes. The penthouse was intimidating at first, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture. But Blake had cleared out an entire room for her, turning it into a reading nook with built-in bookshelves and a window seat overlooking the city. "For your books," he said, "and for you when you need space." "You didn't have to do this," Victoria said, tears in her eyes. "I wanted to," Blake said. "I want you to feel like this is your home too." Living together was an adjustment. Blake woke up at 5 in the morning and went for runs. Victoria liked to sleep until 7 and ease into the day with coffee and a book. Blake was neat to the point of being obsessive. Victoria tended to leave books scattered around whatever room she had been reading in. But they figured it out, compromising and communicating, learning each other's rhythms. The first time they really fought, was about the bookstore. Thomas had been diagnosed with severe arthritis, and his doctor recommended he stop working entirely. The store was losing money, struggling to compete with online giants. Victoria was exhausted, working 12-hour days trying to keep things afloat, coming home too tired to do anything but collapse into bed. "Let me help," Blake said one night when she was hunched over the store's financial statements at their dining table. "Let me invest in the store, modernize it, give you the capital you need to really compete." "No," Victoria said automatically. "Why not?" "Tori, you're running yourself into the ground. I have the resources to fix this." "Because then it wouldn't be mine anymore," Victoria said, her voice rising. "It would be yours. You would have saved it, not me." "That's ridiculous," Blake said, and his tone was harder than she had ever heard it. "This isn't about ego. This is about the store surviving." "Easy for you to say," Victoria shot back. "You've never had to prove yourself. You inherited a successful company. You don't know what it's like to have to fight for every single thing." Blake's jaw tightened. "You think I haven't had to prove myself? You think running a billion-dollar company is easy just because my father started it? I work 70-hour weeks. I have hundreds of employees depending on me. Every decision I make is scrutinized. And I did all of that while grieving my mother and managing my father's expectations." Victoria felt the anger drain out of her, replaced by guilt. "I'm sorry. That wasn't fair." "No, it wasn't," Blake said, but his voice had softened. "Tori, I'm not trying to take over your store. I'm trying to support the woman I love." She froze. "What did you say?" Blake set down the papers he had been holding. "I love you. I've been in love with you since that first date when you admitted you weren't good at this, and I realized I had never met anyone more genuine in my life." I love your passion for books. I love how much you care about your father and the store. I love that you make me want to be more than just a guy who builds buildings." Victoria felt tears streaming down her face. "I love you too, so much. And I'm scared because I don't know how to do this, how to be with someone without losing myself." Blake crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. "You're not losing yourself. You're letting me in. There's a difference." They worked out a compromise. Blake would loan the store money at a minimal interest rate, structured in a way that Victoria could pay back as the business grew. He would connect her with a marketing consultant he knew who specialized in small businesses. But the decisions would be Victoria's. The store would remain hers. With the new capital, Victoria was able to renovate the store, update the website, and launch an online ordering system that could actually compete with the big retailers. She hired 2 part-time employees, so she wasn't doing everything herself. She started a podcast about books that gained a surprising following. Slowly, the store started to turn around. Blake was there for every milestone, cheering her on, celebrating the victories, and consoling her through the setbacks. He fit into her life so seamlessly that Victoria couldn't remember what it had been like before him. For Blake's 32nd birthday, Victoria planned something special. She coordinated with Maria to clear his entire schedule and drove him to a private airport where a small plane was waiting. "What is this?" Blake asked, laughing. "We're going to Maine," Victoria said. "To a little coastal town I found. No work, no phone calls, just us for 3 days." They stayed in a bed and breakfast overlooking the ocean. They walked on rocky beaches, ate lobster rolls at a shack by the water, and spent the evenings wrapped in blankets on the porch watching the sunset. It was simple and perfect. "This is the best birthday I've ever had," Blake said on their last night, holding Victoria close. "Good," she said. "Because I wanted to show you that you don't need fancy things to have a good time. You just need the right person." "I have the right person," Blake said. "You're it for me, Tori. You're my person." They had been together for a year and a half when Blake took her back to the restaurant where they had their first date. Victoria noticed he seemed nervous, which was unusual for him. He kept fidgeting with his napkin, barely touching his food. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm perfect," Blake said. "Actually, I'm terrified, but in a good way." He stood up, and Victoria's heart started pounding because she realized what was happening. Blake got down on one knee right there in the middle of the restaurant, pulling out a small velvet box. "Victoria Flynn, from the moment you told me you weren't good at dating, I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible. You've shown me what it means to build a life based on love and not just success. You've made me a better man. Will you marry me?" Victoria was crying too hard to speak, so she just nodded, holding out her shaking hand so Blake could slide the ring on her finger. The restaurant erupted in applause, but Victoria barely heard it. All she could see was Blake, the man who had waited patiently for her to believe she was worthy of love, the man who had become her entire world. The wedding was 6 months later, a perfect blend of both their worlds. The ceremony was at a beautiful garden venue, intimate with only their closest friends and family. Victoria wore a simple white dress that she had found at a boutique with Emma. Blake cried when he saw her walking down the aisle on her father's arm. Thomas gave a toast at the reception that had everyone in tears. "When Blake first came into our lives, I was skeptical. What would a billionaire want with my daughter? But then I watched the way he looked at her, the way he supported her dreams without trying to take them over. I watched him help out at the bookstore without complaint, make my daughter laugh in a way I hadn't heard since she was a child. Blake doesn't just love Victoria, he cherishes her, and that's all any father can ask for." Blake's toast was simpler. "Tori, You once said you weren't good at dating, but you were always good at loving, at caring, at being exactly who you are without apology. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for seeing past the money and the business to the man underneath. I promise to spend every day for the rest of my life making you as happy as you make me." They honeymooned in Italy. 2 weeks of exploring old cities and eating incredible food and making love in boutique hotels with terraces overlooking the countryside. It was the most carefree Victoria had ever seen Blake, unburdened by work and responsibility. When they returned, they settled into married life with surprising ease. Blake had started delegating more at work, trusting his team to handle things so he could be home for dinner most nights. Victoria had promoted one of her employees to assistant manager, giving herself more flexibility. They found a rhythm that worked for them. A year into their marriage, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. She told Blake by wrapping the positive test in a box and giving it to him at breakfast. He stared at it for a full 30 seconds before looking up at her with wonder in his eyes. "Really?" he asked. "Really," Victoria confirmed. Blake pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "We're going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Victoria asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it," Blake said. "Tori, you've given me everything I never knew I needed. A real home, a real partnership, and now a family. I'm the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy was rough. Victoria had terrible morning sickness for the first 4 months and spent most of the last trimester on bed rest due to high blood pressure. Blake was there through all of it, holding her hair back when she was sick, reading to her when she was confined to bed, rubbing her swollen feet without complaint. Their daughter was born on a snowy February morning. Blake cut the umbilical cord with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face as he held his tiny daughter for the first time. They named her Eleanor, after Blake's mother. "She's perfect," Blake whispered, staring down at the tiny bundle in his arms with absolute awe. "Tori, we made something perfect." Victoria had never seen Blake look more vulnerable or more full of love. This man who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions with confidence was completely undone by a 7-pound baby girl. Thomas came to visit them in the hospital, and Victoria saw him wipe tears from his eyes as he held his granddaughter. "Your mother would have loved to meet her," he said to Victoria, "but I think we're doing just fine without her." Parenthood transformed them both. Blake cut back his hours even more, insisting on being home for bath time and bedtime stories. Victoria brought Eleanor to the bookstore, setting up a playpen in the back office where the baby could nap while she worked. It wasn't always easy. There were sleepless nights and moments of frustration and fears about whether they were doing everything right. But they navigated it together, the way they navigated everything. On their 3rd wedding anniversary, Blake surprised Victoria with something new. He had bought a building 2 blocks from the bookstore, a beautiful old brownstone that had been empty for years. "What is this?" Victoria asked as he led her inside. "It's yours," Blake said. "Well, ours. I thought the store needed more space." The first floor can be an expanded bookstore with a proper coffee shop. The second floor can be event space for author readings and book clubs. The third floor can be an apartment for your dad so he's close by but has his own space. And the fourth floor can be our city home for when we don't want to be at the penthouse. Victoria looked around the space, seeing the vision he had laid out. "Blake, this is too much." "It's not," Blake said. "You've built something incredible with that bookstore. You've turned it from a struggling small business into a community hub. You deserve space to grow. And this time, I'm not giving you money. I'm giving you a building. No loan, no strings. Just a gift from your husband who believes in you." Victoria threw her arms around him, overwhelmed by the gesture. "Have I told you lately that I love you? You show me every day," Blake said, "but I never get tired of hearing it." They renovated the building over the next year, Blake overseeing the construction while Victoria planned the new layout. The expanded bookstore was everything she had dreamed of, with comfortable seating areas, a coffee bar that served pastries from a local bakery, and a children's section where parents could read to their kids. The event space upstairs quickly became a popular venue for book launches and literary events. Thomas moved into his apartment with relief, grateful to be independent but close to his daughter and granddaughter. Blake's prediction about the fourth floor proved wise. Having a city home meant they didn't have to trek back to the penthouse when Victoria worked late or when they wanted Alina to see her grandfather. On Alina's second birthday, the whole family gathered at the bookstore for a party. Emma was there with her new boyfriend, a teacher she had met at a bookstore event. Thomas sat in his favorite chair, watching his granddaughter run around with cake-covered hands. Blake stood with Victoria, his arm around her waist, surveying the chaos with contentment. "You know," Victoria said, "I was so scared that first night at dinner. I thought there was no way this could work, that we were too different." "And now?" Blake asked. "Now I know that the differences don't matter. What matters is that we chose each other every single day. You could have given up when I was too scared to believe in us. But you didn't. You waited." "I told you I would," Blake said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Forever, remember." "Forever," Victoria agreed, watching Alina toddle over to her grandfather with a book clutched in her tiny hands, demanding a story. This was her life now, messy and imperfect and more beautiful than anything she could have imagined. She had built it with the man who had seen past her awkwardness and insecurity to the woman underneath, who had loved her not despite her flaws, but because of her genuine heart. Blake had given her so much security, support, love beyond measure. But Victoria had given him something too. A real home, a family built on more than obligation and expectation, a life filled with simple joys and authentic connection. They had met in the middle, two people from different worlds who had created their own world together. Later that night, after the party ended and Alina was asleep in her crib, Victoria and Blake stood at the window of their city apartment, looking out at the lights of the bookstore below. Flynn's books glowed warm and inviting, a beacon of community and story in the heart of the city. "Do you ever regret it?" Victoria asked. "Choosing this life, it's not exactly what people expect from a billionaire." Blake turned to face her, cupping her cheek in his hand. "Tori, before you, I had money and success and an empty penthouse. Now I have a wife who challenges me to be better, a daughter who looks at me like I'm her hero, a father-in-law who taught me how to fix old coffee makers, and a bookstore where I'm always welcomed. I have a life full of meaning. How could I possibly regret that?" "We're going to have another baby," Victoria blurted out, the words escaping before she could plan how to tell him properly. Blake's eyes widened. "What?" "I found out yesterday," Victoria said, suddenly nervous. "I was going to tell you more romantically, but it just came out. Are you happy?" Blake kissed her, deep and tender and full of promise. "I'm always happy when it comes to you. Always." They had their second daughter 15 months later, naming her Grace. Thomas joked that Blake was going to be outnumbered in a house full of Flynn women, and Blake said he wouldn't have it any other way. Victoria cut back her hours at the bookstore even more, hiring a manager so she could focus on their growing family while still being involved in the business she loved. The years unfolded with a kind of gentle joy that Victoria had never expected. Alina started school and showed signs of inheriting her mother's love of books. Grace was fearless and bold, always climbing things and exploring. Blake remained devoted, never taking for granted the gift of the family they had built together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Blake took Victoria back to Maine, to the same bed and breakfast where they had stayed for his birthday so many years ago. They walked the same beaches, ate at the same lobster shack, and fell into bed exhausted and happy. "Do you remember what you said to me on our first date?" Blake asked as they lay tangled together under the covers. "I said a lot of things on that first date," Victoria said, "most of them embarrassing." "You said you weren't good at this," Blake reminded her. "Dating, relationships, all of it." "I remember." "You were wrong," Blake said, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at her. "You were always good at this. You were good at being honest. You were good at being yourself. You were good at loving with your whole heart once you let yourself. You were exactly what I needed, even when you didn't believe it." Victoria felt tears well up, the good kind. "And you waited for me to figure that out." "I would wait forever for you," Blake said, echoing the words he had spoken a decade ago. "But I'm grateful I didn't have to. I'm grateful for every moment we've had together." "Here's to forever," Victoria said, pulling him down for a kiss, and it was forever. They grew old together, watching their daughters grow into remarkable women. Eleanor opened her own bookstore in another city, carrying on the family tradition. Grace became an architect, designing buildings with her father's company. Blake eventually stepped back from day-to-day operations of Calloway Enterprises, passing the reins to trusted partners so he could focus on what mattered most: his family. Victoria never stopped being amazed by the life they had built. Sometimes she would look at Blake Gray at the temples now, laugh lines carved around his eyes, and remember the nervous young woman at that fancy restaurant who had been so sure she didn't belong. That woman had been wrong. She had always belonged right here, with this man who had seen her worth from the very beginning. They had built something real, something lasting, something that went beyond money or status or any of the things that had seemed so important at the start. They had built a life based on love, patience, and the willingness to meet each other halfway. And that, Victoria thought as she held Blake's hand and watched their granddaughter play in the bookstore that bore her family name, was worth everything. The story that had started with "I'm not good at this" had become a love story for the ages. Proof that sometimes the best relationships are the ones that start with honesty and grow through patience. Blake had waited for Victoria to believe in herself, to believe in them, and that faith had been rewarded with a lifetime of love, laughter, and the kind of happiness that only comes from truly knowing and being known by another person. Forever had turned out to be exactly as wonderful as he had promised it would be.